It's time for the man who taught Vince Carter how to slam.
You can't make this tough up.
The man whose three inspired the Curry family.
Pulls it up for three.
I don't exaggerate, I congratulate. It's time for you-know-who, my man Sekou.
Cutting to the hole for the jam.
It's Sekou Smith's Hang Time Podcast. Take it away.
Everyone's excited right now. Players, fans, anyone basketball related loves this time of year.
Maybe the most exciting and unpredictable seasons ever.
The stars are out. The future looks bright.
Go! Oh, what a move.
How about that?
Here he comes. Oh, if you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball. That was spectacular.
Everybody buckle up. Here we go.
Everybody's going to be interested in seeing what the future face of the NBA looks like.
Major moves over the summer.
It is the most significant summer in NBA history.
Breaking news.
There is major movement. Kemba Walker,
Jimmy Butler,
D'Angelo Russell,
Al Horford.
New faces in new places.
Another summer stunner. We wondered what duo would come together.
Kevin Durant reportedly headed to the Brooklyn Nets.
Joining Kevin Durant in Brooklyn, Kyrie Irving.
Strikes again.
Russell Westbrook is off to Houston, where he'll reunite with James Harden.
Harden sets him up perfectly.
What else can possibly happen this summer?
Breaking news, Kawhi Leonard is now a member of the Los Angeles Clippers. And he's not going alone. Paul George joining him in La La Land.
That may be the greatest show on earth.
We're talking dynamic duo. The King and the Brow are now teammates.
Of course it's championship or bust.
Arguably the biggest topic of the summer, the Battle of L.A.
The fans in L.A. going to be torn. Do we root for our hometown Lakers or do we root for our hometown boys who grew up in L.A.?
Fasten your seatbelts for going down to the wireless Staples Center.
The legend of LeBron continues.
The West is going to be crazy.
Who is coming out of the East?
Under the cone ball.
He really is a freak.
And you guys remember a year where you've got the East and the West so wide open.
I can't predict who's going to win either conference.
Feel the intensity.
Everybody feel like they got a realistic shot at winning the championship.
I'm excited. This has a chance to be one of the best NBA seasons, I think, in the last 5-6 years.
We're back, baby. The NBA is back on your calendar. Opening night is out of the way. Welcome back to the Hang Time Podcast. Sekou Smith here. I'm going to talk with my main man, Sean Powell, about everything you saw in LA last night and preview the teams that we think can win a championship. We're also going to talk to John Schumann about NBA power rankings, kicking off the season around the league and Eastern Conference. Sean, I just want to first commend you for waking up as early as you did on the West Coast. I barely woke up here on the East Coast at a decent hour. You just got out of Staples. Describe that atmosphere, though, for people in the Battle of L.A., the city championship, whatever they want to call it out there. Just how strange an environment that is for the Clippers to be playing a home game with Lakers fans making the majority of the noise, it seemed like, all night.
Yeah, I would probably say the makeup of the crowd was 70-30 Clippers fans, but the Lakers fans were louder. And it's very odd. I don't think you can go to an NBA arena where the other team's star player, LeBron James in this case, hears MVP chants at the free throw line. And I don't know if you can go to an NBA arena where your star player takes the microphone before the game and just kind of welcomes the crowd and things like that, and he hears boos. So that's what Kawhi Leonard heard at Staples Center last night. It shows you what the Clippers are up against, Sekou. It's even though they have Kawhi Leonard, they have Paul George, who didn't play, but Paul George is in the fold, and even though they enter this season as probably the favorites for the NBA championship, they're battling Laker history. They're battling Laker tradition in their own building, which they share with the Lakers. So in addition to playing against LeBron James and Anthony Davis, you got to play against those 16 championship trophies. You got to play against your own history. You're battling your own history, your own stigma. And I think the Clippers found out in a very awkward and strange way what they're up against when they played the Lakers at Staples Center and the whole house wasn't for them.
It was such a interesting game, though. I mean, and at the end of three, it's tied at 85. Goons like me who don't have to write on deadline and say, man, this thing go to overtime. I'm all, because you just want to keep watching. But I go back to the beginning of that game, and I'm looking at Instagram and social media, and people are taking shots of the arena, and somebody took a shot of I guess it was on the video board where it says grit over glam, squad over self, we over me, street lights over spotlights. Like, is that a real thing out there where the Clippers are trying to craft this narrative that, hey, we're the blue collar team in this city, and they're kind of using that as their leverage, maybe their mental leverage, maybe the chip that they need to go at the Lakers and battle them for the hearts and minds of those fans up there?
I think the strategy began when Kawhi Leonard and Paul George were introduced in their press conference this summer. It was held in July in South Central LA at a youth recreation center. That was a curious strategy to hold your introductory press conference there rather than the confines of your own practice facility or maybe a Beverly Hills hotel. I think the message was clear. The Clippers are going for all of LA, okay? The hardworking part of LA, the blue collar part of LA. And I think a lot of fans saw that with the marketing ploy before the game. You know, it's really a poke in the eye of the Lakers, because the Lakers for a long time have been the glamorous franchise, you know, they're pretty, they're entertaining, Hollywood and all that. Well, the Clippers want to go and just sort of represent, another neglected part of LA. You also see it with their, I think their city jerseys that they're going to wear this year with the street Los Angeles, on the front of the jersey. I think they wore that on the cover of Sports Illustrated. So all of this is planned, pre-planned, because the Clippers want, in addition to wanting to beat the Lakers, they want to represent Los Angeles a little bit better than they have in the past. And also consider, Sekou, that they're building once they get past the environmental issues and also James Dolan and the Forum, they're going to put the shovel in the ground for that new arena in Inglewood, California. So this is Steve Ballmer's way of getting a healthy slice of the marketplace in Los Angeles. Obviously, you have to win to do that. Obviously, you have no championship trophies yet, so you got to start building. But this is their way to get the ball rolling in that direction.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Sean. I wrote a note to myself at the end of the third quarter. I pushed back on this in the last 7 months or so. People have talked about, well, Kawhi is the best player in the league. And I was like, hold on with that. Slow down. Like, let's make sure we have a clear head when we talk about the pecking order of players in this league. After that game, Sean, I started to ask myself, like, are you sure you're not ready to say that, yeah, this dude is the most complete, dominant force in the league? If you look at what he did in the finals, you look at how he gets whatever he wants when he wants it on the floor with AD and LeBron, where you got three of the top 5, top 10 players in the league, and he was a cut above. Is it time to give Kawhi his due as the best player in the league?
I don't know if I'll go that far, but I think I'll come close. I think Giannis is still there because, look, the different players. Obviously, if you compare Kawhi to a healthy Kevin Durant, I mean, look, we can go on and on about that conversation, but he's definitely in the conversation. And if someone wanted to anoint him the best player, I would have no serious blowback on that. I think you saw last night, first of all, what Kawhi has done is he has really locked down that mid-range game, to the point where he's almost unguardable at that position. And of course, he's a very good three-point shooter also. And of course, consider that he played that game without Paul George. What happens when Paul George comes back and those two develop some chemistry? Finally, and I asked Paul George this in the preseason, I said, because you and Kawhi can play both ends of the court equally well, does that make you the best duo in the NBA? And Paul George said, yeah. Because when you look at some of the other so-called great players in the NBA, they only play one end of the floor. Obviously Giannis is an exception. A couple others are exception, but they don't have that sort of balance. But anyway, getting back to Kawhi, it was a statement game for him last night. He had to have a good game. I think it was his coronation in Los Angeles. And I think he was really, although he'll never show it, of course, and he'll never express it, but I think he was really up for that game, and it showed. 30 points, very efficient game, didn't make any mistakes, got his teammates involved, played good defense, had some decent blocks. So I think what you saw from Kawhi is probably what you're going to see from Kawhi the rest of the season.
Yeah, he was brilliant. And I think what we saw from the Clippers, Sean, they scored twice as many second chance points as the Lakers. They waxed them in fast break points. And they had 41 bench points more than what the Lakers could produce. The depth, the quality of that depth, Doc Rivers' ability to keep those guys locked in and focused even after they started off the game rough, to me, it's such a simple but effective formula that the Clippers will use this year. They're going to play that same way night after night. Now, they won't have the same emotion necessarily packed around other opponents, but if that's their DNA, if that's the kind of team they're going to be, it makes sense that people are talking about them being there when a championship is on the line. They're going to be an extremely difficult out come playoff time because of all those things. And like you mentioned, we didn't even see them with Paul George last night. They have other elements we haven't even seen yet.
Yeah, and I think the unforgotten player in this whole mix is Lou Williams. Consider last season. First of all, he averaged 20 points a game off the bench, and he only averaged, I think, 26 minutes a game. Okay, so also consider how well he played against the Warriors in the first round of the playoffs last year. He had a couple of games with 30 or more points and really, carried the team on his back when they needed key buckets at the end of those games. And then last night he comes off the bench, bam, 21 points, takes over the scoring void, left because Paul George is not in the mix. And he was a factor and a problem for the Lakers. So, look, Sekou, this shouldn't be that much of a surprise. The Clippers returned 4 core players from a team last year that won 48 games. Montrezl Harrell, who's playing for the bag, by the way. You got Lou Williams, Landry Shamet, Zubac, Patrick Beverly, of course. If you saw how Patrick Beverly was all in LeBron's grill, irritating, and LeBron did not have an efficient game, did not shoot well. I don't know what the point breakdown was when Patrick Beverly was guarding him. He didn't guard him the whole game, but Patrick Beverly set a tone right from the start, and you could see Patrick Beverly's expression at the final buzzer. This guy thought he had just won the NBA championship. He's running around the court with a sneer and throwing fists in the air and things like that. It meant a lot. He wanted to set the tone for the team that every game's important, and you can best believe whenever they play the Lakers, going to be important. Now, Sekou, again, Kyle Kuzma's not on the floor. Okay. Paul George is not on the floor. I think Christmas Day is going to be really a good temperature check for this. I'm not going to call it a rivalry because, it has never been a rivalry, but it's a good temperature check for what the Lakers and Clippers are right now. It's the first legitimate one.
Right. Looking at the rest of the West, Sean, I was in Denver for Media Day, and, you start sizing up these other contenders in the West, and I think there are many more than we've had in the past. Like Denver's legit, Utah's legit. Portland, I think a lot of people are wondering about them. I think they're legit. You got the Clippers and the Lakers. I mean, the West is stacked. We don't, and that's not even to mention what the Warriors could or might be this year with all of the change they've had. But where are you at in terms of pecking order in the Western Conference and how you see the breakdown just in terms of going into the season, who fits where?
Well, I think, you have to add the Lakers. They weren't in the playoffs last year. And yet, not only have to add them, you have to add them with an exclamation point because obviously they're going to be up there at the top. You got the 2 LA teams. People forget that the Trailblazers went to the Western Conference Finals last year. Never sleep on the Spurs. I'm not saying that they're going to be a title contender, but they've got DeJounte Murray back. Walker is a much better player than he was last year, and he also was a little bit hurt last year. I mean, they're going to be sneaky. But obviously, the Denver Nuggets. Look, I mean, they're my pick to finish with the best record in the West. Their depth, Jokic, Murray, Gary Harris might have a bounce back year. They play good defense. They've got a heck of a home court advantage. And plus, I don't think, in this era of time management, I think that's going to affect the Denver Nuggets less than it will the Lakers, less than maybe the Clippers, and maybe some other teams in the West that will probably, rest their stars. And that might cost them, a peg or two in the standings. But I think they don't care because they want to be healthy. Like the Lakers, it's much more important for LeBron James after 17 years of wear and tear on his body to be healthy and not to win 60 games. I don't think that's their goal. Same thing with Anthony Davis, who has a history of, health issues. So, when you put all that into the mix, I can see Utah right up there because they're not going to rest that many players. I can see Denver right up there because of the same reason. But that doesn't mean they're going to be the team standing when June rolls around, because then you got to hit the reset button on the season because nobody's resting in the playoffs, of course.
Yeah. No. Sean, I overlooked them or failed to mention them. And I think a lot of people will kind of have that same attitude about this team in Houston that probably should be right in that mix at the top. I mean, Chris Paul and James Harden were able to do it. Why wouldn't Harden and Russell Westbrook be able to contend in the West? Like, people are going to make arguments why they don't work. I can't figure out how they couldn't work together.
I just think that they have the biggest swing factor of all the contenders. In other words, I don't see, other than barring injury, I don't see the Lakers really falling this year. They're going to be up there. Same with the Clippers, same with the Nuggets, whatever. But Houston has the biggest swing factor, biggest question. In other words, they could be very, very good, or that may not work out. I don't think there's really no in between with that team. I still come back to the central issue with the Rockets. Who plays off the ball? Someone's got to play off the ball. And until I see Russ play off the ball, be it a catch and shoot guy, okay, and he's coming off a season where he wasn't efficient, where he didn't shoot three-pointers very well, okay, when he worked best the last 3 years, even his MVP year, he worked best with the ball in his hand. He can control things. The same thing with James Harden. James Harden probably hasn't played off the ball since Arizona State. I guess you can throw in a couple years with Oklahoma City, but that's it. I think habits are set with these two guys. And as much as they may like each other personally, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that same chemistry, when you're out eating lunch and laughing with each other, that same chemistry is going to spill over on the court. I'm not saying it's not going to work, but I'm also not saying, that there's a guarantee it will work. I have to see it. I hate to be a skeptic because they're two dynamic players, even, still. But I just really have to see that work before I, say for sure they're going to be in that championship hunt.
Yeah. Who's the team, Sean, to you in the Western Conference? And it's hard to pick one in a conference where we think so many of the different teams can be playoff bound, potentially quality teams. Who are we sleeping on? Who are we not paying attention to in the West that has an opportunity to really do something this year that we don't expect?
Well, I mean, you always have to look at some of the younger teams, the Sacramento Kings, for example. Now, again, I don't know if anybody's sleeping on them, but but the young teams, you don't know if those young players are ready to make that leap. And those leaps come without warning. Those breakout seasons where, they're pretty good, but are they going to be next level? And all of a sudden, they have a next level performance that season. So, is De'Aaron Fox next level? Is he ready to push for an All-Star berth? What about Buddy Hield? Is he ready to establish himself as maybe one of the top 3 outside shooters in the league, along with Bradley Beal? And I'm sure I'm missing somebody else in that mix. Is this the year when he does that? We don't know. They have upside. So I think you have to look at some of the teams and some of the players with upside. What about Kristaps Porzingis and Luka Doncic in Dallas? I don't know if those 2 players are ready to carry an entire team, but are they ready to be next level? And so those are the questions that I'm asking. Look, if Zion Williamson doesn't get hurt, all right, he's about to miss a month, somewhere around there, whatever. And he came out and was like gangbusters right from the start, then I would probably say people would be sleeping on New Orleans Pelicans because that's an intriguing mix there that they have. But, that's a question mark now, and we don't know how Zion's going to be. And then by extension, we don't know how New Orleans is going to be.
Yeah, it's such a crazy season. We had this monstrous movement in free agency and in the offseason trades, everything. I didn't know if we could get an opening night, Sean, that would live up to the offseason we had. But the Clippers-Lakers, they got everybody juiced. I'm talking my dad at 70-plus years old was texting me at like 1 o'clock in the morning, like laughing about how intense the game was. It was like a conference finals game. I feel like the tone has been set, with that opening night deal with Toronto getting rings, on one side of the country, and one side of North America, rather. And then, the Lakers and the Clippers kind of previewing what we all suspect might be a collision course throughout the course of the regular season and then potentially in the playoffs in the West. I hope you have found a very clever way to get to the Staples Center because you're gonna be there all season. Like you got your hands full in LA.
Yeah, you're right about that. Staples Center is my new home. I actually should be thankful that they don't play in separate arenas because now I'm crisscrossing all over LA during rush hour trying to get there. But without a doubt, man, Staples Center, it was a very special place last night. It's going to be a special place this season. And what I hope for, Sekou, and what everybody hoped for, all the fans, regardless of, whose team you're rooting for, is good health. And the season started out so badly in that sense with Zion Williamson news. I hope that's not an omen. I want LeBron to be healthy. I want Anthony Davis. I want Kawhi. I want Paul. Because in the end, as basketball fans, we're all deprived when any player is hurt, obviously, but particularly when key players are hurt. I thought last night was a good launch for the NBA season in spite of Zion Williamson not playing. If you're a baseball fan, look, you're probably kicking yourself how the NBA could upstage Game 1 of the World Series. That certainly was in the mix, but I thought it was a good start for the NBA. And look, as basketball fans and as basketball journalists, let's hope that, it stays this way so we all have something to talk about and write about.
No doubt. Listen, get you some rest, Sean. I know you had working on about a 3-hour turnaround. So catch that cat nap, man, and enjoy it. And we'll talk to you down the road.
It's all worth it. Thanks, man.
Welcome to the 2019 NBA Finals.
Champion, I'm a champion. You can't stop me. I'm a champion. I'm a champion. I'm a champion.
Draymond. And Fleet. Up top. Bringing down the rain, the heavens, the sky. Saul has Jerebko. Great cut. Powell with a slam dunk on the feet. Let's go.
Got you frozen in your tracks like headlights to
foul. Shot's good and one.
Leonard driving down baseline left, finds an angle, gets fouled.
Lowry lets it fly, and it's good.
I'm a champion.
Oh, Danny Green!
Great move, lays it in. Siakam scores again, gets it to Van Vliet.
Oh, he puts it in.
Around pretty good right now, but you fly around with them.
Here's Lowry, feeds Siakam, rolling down the post and scoring on the lay-in. The Raptors looking for their first lead. Pulls the trigger on a three and hits.
Can't stop me, I'm a champion. Raise my hand in victory for the battle's begun. Confidence separates losers and winners. Endurance separates pros and beginners.
Lowry lighting it up here in the first 2+ minutes. A wild first half, 14 lead changes.
Love is steel, iron will and skill. Take me from the bottom to the top of the hill. Top. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
Curry with the three. Fred VanVleet with the 6th three-pointer. And here they are, about to be crowned NBA champions.
Canada, the NBA title is yours.
We the North are now we the champions.
The Toronto Raptors are the 2019 NBA champions.
From Sean Powell on the West Coast, I call him our West Coast bureau chief for everybody that's listening. We transitioned to the Eastern Conference, and John Schumann, who's up in the tri-state area, keeping his eye on all things Eastern Conference and around the league. So, Shu, you were like everybody else. You saw the bling last night that the Raptors slid on their fingers. But when we talk about the Eastern Conference and kind of forecast who might do what this season, nobody mentions the Raptors as being a factor. Are we overlooking them, or is it proper to assume that without Kawhi, they won't be a team that's in the mix?
You know, I still have a hard time just putting them on the same level as Milwaukee and Philadelphia. But the one thing I realized in watching them last night and also watching them in their last preseason game against Brooklyn on Friday, which was a little bit of a dress rehearsal, is they have 7 guys. Well, first of all, Nick Nurse only trusts these 7 guys. He went, I think, the first 17 minutes of that win over New Orleans playing only 7 guys. And it's the 7 rotation guys that are returning from last year's team. He clearly doesn't trust any of the new guys yet, although Terrence Davis ended up getting some playing time in that game. And, you know, the sort of end of the bench guys that are returning aren't on that levels yet. So he trusts these 7 guys, but those 7 guys are good, and those 7 guys know what they're doing. And that's and that includes Fred VanVleet, who had an incredible game against New Orleans, and just, man, little dude just knows how to play. Like, I mean, I can't be the only person in this, and only NBA fan who sort of lives vicariously through Fred VanVleet. Because he's this sort of little, not so athletic dude that just plays tough and you know, gets to the basket, hits huge shots. But yeah, even before we got to opening night, you know, after watching some of that game against Brooklyn, I raised my expectations for the Raptors just because of how good those 7 guys looked and just how, you know, confident they play and how comfortable they are. You know, they're still like missing a little bit just when you compare them to Philly and Milwaukee. And I can't wait to see them play those teams. And I can't wait to see them play Boston, which they do on Friday night. But I think they just have championship DNA still in those sort of 7 returning guys. I know Anunoby didn't play in the postseason last year. But he looked really good in the opener, I thought, you know, attacking off the dribble, shooting when he was open. So I you know, I believe in them as a team that's going to win the games it's supposed to, and is not going to sort of beat itself just because of how good that core group is, even without Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green.
Yeah, I feel like we've all kind of separated the East into 2 categories. You know, we got Milwaukee and Philly as the leaders of the pack, and then everybody else in the East, we're just not sure where they fit in that pecking order going down. Are we right to separate Philly and Milwaukee in whatever order you have them based on what they did last year, what they have coming back, and what they've added? Because I like both those teams. They make sense to me just when we go into a season and we're trying to decide who has the kind of makeup, at least on paper, before we see anybody really get into the meat of the NBA season, they look like the kinds of teams you expect to make the finals, or at least the conference finals.
It's hard to put anybody else on their level. Just Philly is just so talented and so big. I mean, they have Embiid and Simmons and Horford. Just start right there. I mean, that is a tough and talented, and Horford. I mean, we've talked about Horford so much on this podcast. I think the world of that dude, and just how smart he is, and how much of a glue guy he is. And then you get Richardson and Harris. That's tough. And then Milwaukee, I mean, they were destroying teams in the preseason. I don't think Giannis Antetokounmpo knows the difference between a preseason game, a regular season game, and a playoff game. I really don't. I think the dude just plays, and
he's young. That's why he's so young still, and on his ascent, he doesn't care, which is a beautiful thing.
And I think they lost something with Brogdon and switching him out for Wesley Matthews. I mean, they lose obviously something off the dribble, and we can all simplify the Bucks as, Giannis attacking and everybody else shooting. But no, they had Brogdon's ability to get to the basket and get into the paint as well was big for them. And I think they're going to miss that. But who says that, Antetokounmpo can't get better himself? Like, the dude still has exactly.
No question.
And just from watching the preseason, I mean, they just know who they are. They know what they're doing. They do it really well. And that's why I elevated them. I was thinking Clippers number 1, Bucks number 2, basically in my initial power rankings. But then I flipped it. I said Bucks number 1, Clippers number 2, just because there's more of an unknown with the Clippers. And I think we know what the Bucks are. And right now we should just say, hey, they're the best team in the league, and they were the best team in the league last year until through game 2 of the conference finals, and then things fell apart.
Right.
But I just feel like they're going into the season as this is the best team right now. And yes, obviously the Clippers probably have a higher ceiling just with the talent that they have and the depth that they have. But I just feel like day one, it's the Bucks right now. And then we'll obviously we're going to have every team in the league has questions to be answered. I just think they have the fewest, basically.
Which team in the East to you, Shu, has the red light on already in terms of they gotta they go into the season with the mandate of this has to be a turning point season. Like, you got to go from wherever you were previously to that next level now, or we have to start examining what's going on and deciding if it's time to make a change or to go in a different direction.
I think there's a few of those teams, but just Philadelphia is one. I think, they have to figure out if Embiid and Simmons works to the level that it should, just given how talented those two guys are. I mean, we've discussed their sort of offensive issues with, Simmons occupying space in the paint when that should be Embiid, where Embiid catches the ball too often, 25 feet from the basket, and that's not, his catches should be inside. But if Simmons is on the floor occupying that space, that becomes, more difficult. So I think I definitely believe they deserve another season to figure this out. And if Simmons can space the floor just a little bit more, that can make a world of difference. But that's a team that, hey, if this doesn't work to a certain degree with given how talented these two guys are, maybe there's another direction they have to go with one or the other. And I imagine it would be stick with Embiid and find, complement him where you can put 4 shooters around him. But to a lesser degree, it's a good question. I guess Detroit has, I think they're just sort of waiting for Reggie Jackson's contract to come off the books, but they're just so dependent on Blake Griffin, and Blake Griffin going into the season with an injury is not a good sign. And I think that team could be in trouble. And then otherwise, I think Orlando, has to take a step forward. They put, they're trying to run it back. They took a step forward last year under Steve Clifford. They had a great defensive team. but they lost in the first round, and then they decided to re-up with Vucevic and Terrence Ross to sort of run it back. I like the Aminu addition, but if that doesn't get them beyond the first round, then I think they've got to find somewhere. They've got to upgrade at one of those other positions, preferably in the backcourt.
Right. I look at Brooklyn and Boston, and I say to myself, these are two teams that are going to be operating with wildly unrealistic expectations. People are going to assume, even with KD on the shelf, people are going to expect Brooklyn to take a leap because Kyrie and because they know what could be potentially on the horizon.
I see different expectations for the Nets. Like if you look at like the computer models, they all have them like around the 40 to 42 win range, right, and as a 7 or 8 seed.
Yes, that sounds right. That sounds reasonable.
Yeah,
but I don't think that's what the fan expectation is.
Yeah, I guess, but I think the fans know that they got to wait 1 year. They got to wait a year for Kevin Durant before they realize it. But that doesn't mean this would be a wasted year. I think they can obviously, they have work to do, and I think you're my favorite Net is a big factor. If Karis LeVert takes a step forward and has a healthy season, he could be the third star that this team needs. But the other thing is they also have the potential with LeVert, with Jared Allen. They have all their picks to trade, I believe. They have the potential to trade for a third star should one become available. Like, that's a team that has the ability to say, okay, we've got two great players and a lot of depth. We can sacrifice some of that depth for a third great player. That's one of the teams I think that can do that. Denver in the West obviously is another one. And so I think I'm fascinated to see the Nets. I think they can be good. I think if you're thinking they're the third or fourth best team in the East, that might be a little bit high expectations. Although I see them sort of as in the 5 to 6 range, perhaps. Maybe behind Toronto and Boston. But like I said, LeVert, I've always been really high on LeVert. He was their best player in the playoffs, and I think he could make a big leap and really, sort of raise expectations for them even before they get Durant back.
Right. Boston is my most intriguing team in the East to keep an eye on, only because we've expected certain things out of their young guys. I don't feel like they lived up to it last year, didn't have an opportunity to play up to it last year the way they were constructed. Now you have a different dynamic, not only with Kemba Walker in Kyrie's spot, but no Al Horford. So that settling influence is gone. But also nothing in the way of Tatum and Brown continuing to develop their games and become the kind of players that everybody thinks they could be. Are they the most interesting team to you maybe in the East in that playoff mix?
Yeah, I think so. And I think you can't discount. Obviously, they lost a ton with Horford and Baines, so they lost a ton defensively. The question is now, how well can they defend without those two guys? And if they can make up for what they've lost defensively with offense. And you say, nothing's in the way of Tatum and Brown except for more wings. They still have, Gordon Hayward, and still have Marcus Smart, who needs, who's going to take time. And Kemba Walker is obviously going to control the ball quite a bit. Maybe not as much as Kyrie Irving, but I question whether they whether they need to trade one of their wings, and maybe it's one of the young guys, maybe it's Hayward, I don't know, or one of their perimeter players for more inside. I think they have a lot of questions to answer with whatever front line they have left, whether it's Daniel Tice or Cantor or Vincent Poirier, who they brought over from France. Like, all these guys are not necessarily a starting five and how do they deal with that? And so, there's a lot of questions with this team. I personally it's just what kind of level can they defend at? They've always been a good defensive team or a solid defensive team under Brad Stevens, but obviously they've always had Al Horford or Aaron Baines. And so it's a huge question for them. And like I said, I think there's a trade potential if they feel like things aren't working out to the level they want it to be, if they can go trade a small for a big.
Finally, Shu, on the East, give me one team that's being slept on. Who's the team that's not on everybody's radar that we should be watching out for this year in the Eastern Conference?
I don't know if there is one. Like, I like the Hawks, just how fun they are, but man, they're going to be terrible defensively. There are like 4 teams that are just going to be really bad. That's just, Charlotte, Cleveland, New York, and Washington. Like, those 4 teams are going to be bad. And so you're not sleeping. If you don't like any of those 4 teams, you're not sleeping on any one of them. I'm right there with you.
You're canceling Christmas in 4 cities.
Maybe I'm sleeping on Indiana. I don't know. Like, I just think they lost so much of their rotation last year that it's hard to believe that they can just sort of pick up where they left off. Even if they get Victor Oladipo back relatively early and relatively healthy as far as just being back to full strength, Victor Oladipo. So I think there's, once you get beyond the top 6, there's lots of questions. I think Chicago could be interesting. Like, Chicago has the potential. They have the talent. And I like the vets that they've brought in, where it's Satoransky, Otto Porter last season, and then Thaddeus Young. Like, that will make them a more professional basketball team. And that's huge. And so I think Chicago is the team that can sort of take a leap in the East.
Yeah. Well, look, and all we're doing is forecast right now, Shu. We're one night in, plenty of season to be played. We'll see who does what, but appreciate you taking a little time. We'll talk again soon, obviously, about power rankings. I know you've cranked them up already, but we'll have a little bit better data to work with, obviously, once we get through the first week of the regular season. So talk soon about power rankings and more. Appreciate your time, man.
All right, I'm going to start to put together some trivia questions for you, too.
Appreciate that. All right, Shu.
Thanks for listening to Sekou Smith's Hang Time Podcast. Be sure to check out previous episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, NBA.com/hangtime, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, Hoops fans.